Welcome back to the deep dive. So you sent over a fascinating set of sources this time. Not about, the usual stocks or trading apps.
No, definitely not. This is about the stuff underneath all that.
Exactly. The literal operating system running global finance. We're talking hidden infrastructure, the architecture behind every single transfer, every card swipe, every loan, everything.
That's right. The source material calls it the next rails. And the key insight, really, is that the apps we see, that's mostly just theater, as they put it.
Right.
If you want to understand the real power and, frankly, the real friction, you have to look deeper at the foundational machinery.
So our mission today is to sort of map out this shift. The sources talk about moving from an age of, settlement, to an age of synchronization.
Synchronization.
It makes sense. Every empire needs roads, every network needs rails. And the sources, they really highlight this visual tension. You've got the old rails, ACH, Swift, Visa kind of creaking along.
Yeah, the familiar names.
And then these new rails, represented by things like blockchain layers, a completely different approach based on instantaneous truth. Okay, let's unpack this. Why is this change apparently so needed?
Well, if we can get our heads around this architecture, these rails, we're basically understanding the deep rules of how value moves globally. And the old system worked for decades, right? But now it's like a drag chute on the whole economy.
Okay, let's dig into that drag chute idea. Section 1 calls this backbone reliable but rusted. We're talking ACH, Fedwire, Swift, functional, yes, but locked in, decades-old code?
Yeah, legacy code. They're siloed, they're slow, and honestly, they add cost and risk to pretty much every transaction.
The slowness, the source mentions ACH still batches payments like it's 1974.
It basically does. And that delay isn't just annoying, it's opportunity cost. Money sitting idle. But the real headache, the big friction, is when you go cross-border. Ah, right. Swift, we hear that name constantly. But the sources stress this key point. Swift sends the message, the instruction, not the actual money. Exactly, that's critical. When you send money overseas, that Swift message kicks off this incredibly complex chain. It's like a puzzle.
How so?
Because every bank, every network involved, they all speak their own slightly different private dialect, as the source puts it. So the whole thing needs translation, multiple steps, intermediaries, checking other intermediaries.
The source called it linguistic archaeology.
That's the one. It's this whole back and forth confirming who owes what to whom. And each step adds potential for errors, compliance risks, reconciliation nightmares. It costs billions globally.
Yeah.
Billions, just in failures and float risk.
So the fundamental problem isn't just bad management. It's the design itself. The old rails were built assuming funds had to wait for humans to check things.
Precisely. Delay was baked in, assumed. But the new way of thinking, the digital native way, it demands instant truth, verification through code, through math. The old systems just, they can't keep up. Their architecture is fundamentally opposed to that kind of speed.
Okay, so if speed and connectivity are the big issues, how big of a change are we talking? Is finance facing a total reboot? This sort of brings us to that idea in the sources that finance is way overdue for its internet moment.
Yeah, think about it. Remember the early internet, before the standard protocols. You had CompuServe over here, AOL over there.
Walled gardens, Prodigy, islands. You couldn't easily send an email between them.
Exactly. Then came TCP/IP, HTTP, DNS. These fundamental standards, they didn't just connect the islands, they kind of smashed the walls down, forced a common language, and suddenly, boom, the world synced up its communication.
And the argument is finance never really had that moment.
It didn't. We built this incredibly complex digital civilization, but it's running on essentially analog plumbing. Still, these gated gardens, policed by intermediaries, still needing humans to reconcile everything.
But hang on, let me push back a bit here. Why didn't the big banks just build instant systems years ago? Isn't there an argument that the delay, that gap between the message and the actual settlement served a purpose? Like regulatory checkpoints.
That's a really fair point.
Yeah.
And yes, the delay was partly the security layer. It was rooted in regulation, in established trust processes. You send the SWIFT message, fine. But the actual final irreversible settlement, that happens later. Often needs manual sign-offs, buried deep in ledgers.
Okay.
The fear was always, if you make settlement instant, do you amplify risk? Could things spiral out of control faster?
So how do the new rails handle that? How do they get speed without creating massive systemic risk?
Well, they basically collapse that whole duality. They shift finance from a system based on trust me to a system based on here's the proof, mathematical proof. On the blockchain, The message is the movement. They're inseparable. When a transaction is confirmed on the ledger, it's done. Final. Immediate. Cryptographically secured. There's no waiting period for reconciliation because the verification is inherent in the process itself.
So finality happens at the speed of the network's consensus. Verified by math, not by bureaucratic processes.
You got it. No middleman needed for that core settlement step. No gatekeepers in the same way. It replaces that human-based trust network with decentralized mathematical verification. The source puts it nicely. Trust no longer waits for clearance, it confirms itself. The need for permission kind of evaporates because the transaction's validity is right there in the code. Exactly.
Okay, this is where, for me, it starts to get really interesting. We're moving beyond just speed now into intelligence, right? These new rails, blockchains, interledger protocols, layer 2s, they don't just carry value faster.
No, they compute it. That's the leap. We're talking about genuinely programmable capital.
Programmable capital.
It's not just an entry in a database anymore. It's like a living instruction. The authors say logic becomes liquidity. Contracts become carriers. It's quite poetic, but it's accurate.
Okay, but what does it actually look like? I get smart contracts automating payments, but how is that fundamentally different from, say, setting up an automated bank transfer now?
The key difference is what the source calls atomic motion and the guaranteed integrity of that.
Atomic motion.
Yeah, it means a transaction, no matter how complex, either executes perfectly across every single one of its conditions or it fails completely. Nothing half done. It guarantees the computational result.
Yeah, okay.
So imagine a complex payment, like a mortgage. One single transaction could pay the principal, instantly split the interest off into some tokenized yield-bearing instrument, and simultaneously generate a real-time, verifiable audit trail for regulators, all in one go, one atomic step, guaranteed.
Wow, that self-auditing part. That's huge. It changes capital from just being like a passive pile of money
Into an active agent.
Yeah.
The new rails don't just move capital, they let capital think. Imagine the human hours freed up from just reconciliation and compliance checks.
Okay, but with great power, right? This capability must have some pretty significant knock-on effects beyond just finance.
Oh, absolutely. And this brings us straight into the politics of motion, as the source material puts it.
Politics of motion.
Think about it. Historically, controlling the rails, the roads, the sea lanes, the financial pipes, that's always been how you control civilization, right? Monetary policy, sanctions, embargoes. What are they really?
They're toggles on the flow of value.
Exactly. Toggles on the flow. And these new open, permissionless rails, well, they fundamentally challenge the ability to just flip those toggles.
Because if the system is verified by math and consensus, not a central authority,
then those traditional levers of control get weaker, maybe disappear entirely in some contexts.
which explains why the reaction is so intense.
Completely polarized. For the traditional gatekeepers, nation-states, this could look like a genuine existential threat to their power, their sovereignty. But for others, it looks like liberation, financial freedom on a global scale. So the fight over this infrastructure, it isn't just economic, it's deeply ideological. The source calls it the new global Cold War. Sovereignty rewritten in software. That's a powerful line. And this century's borders are drawn in code. It really hammers home that the underlying infrastructure dictates who gets access, who sets the rules. If that infrastructure becomes truly open and global, power shifts away from nation states, perhaps more towards networks. Okay, so we have this vision. New rails, pure code, open, fast, intelligent. And the reality. Old rails regulated, slow, compliance-driven, state-linked. There's a massive gap there, isn't there? Regulatory chasm. Huge gap.
How do you actually bridge that? How does the existing financial world even start to adopt this new stuff without breaking everything or falling foul of regulations?
Yeah, you can't just flip a switch. You need a transition layer, a regulated bridge. And that's where the sources introduce this company, Metallicus.
Metallicus, right?
They're positioning themselves exactly there as the bridge between eras, operating right at that intersection where compliance meets computation.
So like the connective tissue, linking the regulated world with the speed and liquidity of these new open networks.
That seems to be the goal, yes.
Yeah.
They describe their system as a living architecture, programmable, auditable, but crucially interoperable and designed with compliance built in. They're not trying to, burn down the banks.
Right.
It's more about giving institutions the tools, the gateway, to access this new blockchain efficiency,
Yeah.
but in a way that works legally, that satisfies the regulators.
So for a bank, it's like a compliance-ready gateway to blockchain liquidity. They can tap into that speed and self-auditing capability, but still tick all the KYC AML boxes.
That's the value proposition for institutions, yes. And for individuals, the aim seems to be offering genuine self-custody. You actually own your digital assets, but with the kind of security and regulatory framework people expect from traditional finance. Merging the best of both, maybe?
So Metallicus isn't aiming to be just another player in the system.
No, the analogy the source uses is more like the new bloodstream itself, upgrading how value circulates, but without killing the patient, the existing financial institutions and regulatory structures.
It lets the old world kind of adapt, survive, and even thrive by integrating this new mathematical truth, but without giving up stability.
That appears to be the strategy, providing compliant tools for the synchronization era.
Okay, so pulling it all together, what does this mean for us, for people using the system day to day? The endgame vision seems pretty clear. Old rails built globalization, and new rails will build digital civilization. The whole idea is moving beyond settlement risk, beyond delays, to a truly synchronized world, where value moves like data instantly, freely. Markets become more like living ecosystems, constantly reacting. Wealth gets more fluid. Nations might operate more like networks.
And capital basically moves itself without needing layers of human approval for every step.
It feels like the whole infrastructure itself is designed to disappear.
Yeah.
Moving from being like obvious train tracks we see and interact with.
Exactly, to something seamless, integrated, almost invisible.
Like gravity.
That's the final, really thought-provoking idea the source leaves us with. When this synchronization is complete, when it's everywhere, the word rails just won't make sense anymore. It'll just be the gravitational field of the digital age.
Wow.
The infrastructure becomes an invisible constant, like the air we breathe. You don't think about gravity, it just is. So the question becomes, what does it mean for you, for everyone, when the fundamental rules governing how value moves become literally invisible?
Something to definitely think about as this new era kicks off.
Absolutely. A lot to consider there.